getting out of school for the summer. So testing of any sort is the last thing on their minds. But parents, our next guest says you should use these summer months to get your children tested in a variety of areas, as it could pay off in a huge way when school starts again in the fall. Licensed psychologist and author Dr. Erik Fisher, we like to call him Dr. E, joins us now to explain. And you're saying, when I say this could pay off, you mean in a big way?
Oh, I think it's one of the best investments you can make in your child's future, because being able to plan for their education early on, we're talking in elementary years, can set the rest of the course of their life. So many times we see kids who lose interest in school, have behavioral issues at home and at school because there are things that are going on underneath the surface that we don't see. So what we have to look at when we get a really good evaluation, it's not just an educational overview. I like really good comprehensive neuropsychological evaluations that looks at a good detailed history, especially if they're adopted. You want to get as good a history as possible, even from birth parents if they're available. But you also then want to look at IQ, attention, processing, which is different than attention. Sensory issues are critical, because if you treat a sensory issue the way you treat an attention deficit, and they can look alike, but you give them stimulants, you can actually make the sensory processing difficulties worse. You also want to look at allergy issues, chemical sensitivities, because allergy issues and chemical sensitivities can mimic ADD issues or processing and can cause and contribute to learning issues drastically. And then look at neurometric studies, which are like quantitative electroencephalograms or beam studies. These look at brainwave profiles, or the way your brainwave patterns or brain metabolism works, so that you can see if there are issues in the frontal lobe, temporal lobe, different areas where it may affect learning, concentration, focusing. All this really puts together a great puzzle, and each piece is as important to that puzzle along the way.
Now, there are 3 tests that you put at the top of all of those lists, and that's auditory.
Yeah, looking at the differences between auditory processing and attention, visual processing attention, and even kinesthetic, meaning movement related. Because if you try to work with your child and tell them what to do all the time, or teachers are a lot of times telling kids what to do when they're visual learners or they have better visual attention, you're going to be teaching to their weakness. You always want to teach to their strength while ameliorating or improving the weaknesses. The other thing I say is, if your child has a pattern of learning, you probably have that same pattern because of the genetic influences on the way our brainwave patterns work and our learning styles work and things like that. So that's really important for parents then to look at and recognize, if this is a problem for me and I'm doing the same things with my kids that other people do with me that taught to my weaknesses, then I'm potentially contributing to the problems.
Wow, and you say the earlier the better. Is there a cost attached to this?
The cost can be expensive. I would say, and insurance doesn't often pay for voluntary evaluations, but like I said, look at it as an investment, okay? Because you might spend a lot more on therapies or lost income down the line, or educational issues, than you would if you just spent the money up front. So it can be at $1,000, anywhere up to $3,000. It depends on how comprehensive. But the thing is, to evaluate, you want to help your child get off on the best footing. You as a parent aren't skilled at knowing what their skill strengths are. You might see some of those things, and that's important to add, but let a professional. I always recommend a neuropsychologist, because they do more comprehensive evaluations. To me, it's more than just an educational evaluation.
Well, and considering the number of years your children are going to be in school, comparing that to the amount of money you're going to pay up front, that's a small investment, but it's going to pay off in a mighty way.
Change the course of a lifetime many times.
That's really good stuff. Dr. E, thank you so much for that. For more information on today's parenting segment with Dr. E, just click on the viewer information story on the Fox 5 app. 9:37 is your time now. Good day, Atlanta's Gravere.